Well, thank you very much. The privilege is actually mine to be here to discuss these important issues with you today. Tech is moving really, really fast. It's probably the fastest we'll ever see in human history. And it's a race. Whether it's USA, whether it's China, it is a race. And I've been fortunate since leaving politics about 2 years ago. I've spoken at the White House, been at UN events, doing work with the World Bank right now. So I get to speak to very senior political leaders, senior government officials, not just here in Australia, but globally, and captains of industry. And I can tell you right now that in every one of those discussions, AI is central. And it's for good reason. You've already heard from the great speakers already this morning how transformational it is if we get it right. But just because we can move fast, because AI is like the Ferrari in the room, just because we can move fast doesn't mean we win the race. We've got to make sure that this is going faster than I wanted to go. So let's just pause that there. Just because it's going fast doesn't mean we go far. We need to make sure that the trust principles are in place. Otherwise, what happens? You have a Ferrari, because everybody's talking about AI, which is the Ferrari, or it's that sexy thing, or if you're driving a McLaren, it's a classy thing. But the reality is, it is powerful, it's fast, and it's also expensive. But if we don't get the Ferrari right, the trust principles right, then putting Ferrari on a goat track is also very damn dangerous. And if you think about the data architecture here in this great country of ours, I think we are on a goat track. Like silos are talking to each other, there are data lakes, but moreover, there are a lot of data swamps, and bad creatures come out of that. And then we're trying to put AI over the top. Again, a Ferrari on a goat track, that's a recipe for disaster. So what we need to do is to create the trust principles in place. It's not just having an AI in the garage, revving up and roaring and saying, hey, come and have a look at this. This is so cool. We all want to get into that car. We need to make sure that the trust architecture is in place. Otherwise, when the car's on the road, bad things will happen. Now, that's what happens with the rapid adoption. When we do get rapid adoption, if we don't get the foundations right, things fail. And we've seen that before. And not just in relation to AI, we've seen it in relation to things like robo-debt, particularly in this great country. Robo-debt had nothing to do with AI. Zero. Nothing. I'll go back again. Sorry about this. It had nothing to do with AI. But what it did have to do with human failure. And when human fails, bad consequences happen. And we saw that with robo-debt. But every time we speak to senior government officials, they talk to me about robo-debt. And they say, well, we're a bit hesitant. I talk about AI and they do these things. The body language just cramps up. And that's because legitimately they're scared. Governments are inherently conservative. What robo-debt was cast a long shadow. So we need to make sure more than ever before we get the foundations right. Otherwise, those things happen. The whole system fails. Let me talk to you about Sprite. Sprite is one of the foundations that I talk about. That's security, privacy, resilience, inclusion, transparency, and ethics. These are absolutely critical foundations. Because if we don't get these trust principles right, then we're in a world of pain. And I can tell you in relation to each of them, security, privacy, resilience, inclusion, transparency, ethics, they are based on 12 years of ministerial experience. Each of these that I've conjured up is not just a fictitious or me entering into a chatbot and say, give me some trust principles. These were based on real-world examples of me literally falling over when I was a minister, making a mistake, and then getting back up. And trust me, they are powerful. Just think about security. We saw how Kelly gave that very powerful example of essentially an AI agent, a bot, bring in every one of you. We're moving into an agentic age. No ifs or buts about it. By 2035, the agentic age will be mainstream. But imagine this. Everyone now has AI agent in their phone. With the robotics in the next decade, it will be a Jarvis in their home, right? But imagine if the AI agent became a double agent or a sleeper agent. That's why if we thought security was important, cybersecurity was important in the boardrooms and cabinet tables now, imagine how powerful it needs to be moving forward. And that's just security. Again, if we go through privacy, resilience, inclusion, transparency, ethics, they are all critical foundation stones. And they are the trust principles, again, from lots of lived experience. Let me give you an example in relation to AI, and in particular with ethics. We all remember, I'll learn how to use this clicker eventually, I apologise, but who watched this show on Netflix? I watched it twice. I remember it came out in January 2020 or February 20. I would have watched it in about March. Now, cast your mind back to 2020. That was COVID, deep COVID. Now, we all can learn from the benefit, have the benefit of hindsight. But back then in COVID, in March 2020, no one knew what was going on. No government knew what was happening. I was frantically looking at the net saying, what's happening? I was looking at Asia in particular, Singapore, Taiwan, Vietnam, because they went through SARS and MERS. So I'm thinking they've got some clues on how to deal with pandemics. But no one knew. We were getting advice saying we don't know where this is going to mutate. Is it going to mutate up or down? And if it mutates up, is it going to be another viral infection like a meningitis or a meningococcal? Like, if it becomes that, what happens? We were all scared and frightened, including governments. I was petrified as to what was going to happen. I then saw this documentary, Coded Bias. And at that time, I was trying my best to get everybody onto the Service New South Wales app. Because that way we can do QR check-ins, we can distribute vouchers through it, we can do border passes, we can do a whole lot of things. But then I saw this and I thought, oh my God, I have asked people to get onto the Service app and we're going to be using AI and I haven't got any frameworks in place. For those that haven't seen Coded Bias, basically if you've seen Minority Report, that's Coded Bias. But in reality, it wasn't sci-fi anymore. And we all know, again, when it comes to ethics, if we don't get the ethics right, AI simply reflects bias. It doesn't create bias, it reflects it. Garbage in, garbage out. So I got really desperate. I then called my good friend Ian Opperman, who was the chief data scientist, and I said, mate, I just saw a documentary and I'm sweating. I'm freaking out. Like, we're asking millions of people to get onto the app and we're going to be using machine learning and artificial intelligence. Where the hell is our framework? Because if this fails, we will breach trust. We all thought the Australia card slowed us down. This would slow down the transformation journey for another generation for the people in New South Wales and potentially Australia. People would say, look what they did there, those idiots. So he got the team and he said, all right, we'll get this AI assurance framework in place. We put an AI assurance framework, we published it in, I think it was 1 year later in about January 2021. And we were one of the first jurisdictions, I think it was us and Singapore, the only two jurisdictions to actually put out an assurance framework that early. And it wasn't just a framework that had motherhood principles, do this, don't do that, love your neighbour type things. These were actual frameworks to say, if you tick this box, you can go to the next level and next level, i.e. there was real robustness around it. And it gave us a lot of confidence. And how did it give us confidence? Well, look at this. With the AI assurance framework, we could use, and again, I'll learn the clicker, we could use AI in relation to Taylor Swift. Now, she's not animated. I actually saw her, but she's not animated. But what was the use of AI in here? Crowd control. We used AI through the AI assurance framework to see the crowd and not to identify people, because there were cameras everywhere, but not to identify people, but to see if they were smiling or angry, upset. Because if they're smiling, the crowd moves, and happy days, everyone's happy. But if they're angry, frustrated, well, it could be, crowd crush, some problems happening. We probably need to get some more, patrol officers around just to calm the farm. Right? That's the power of using AI in real time to manage hundreds of thousands of people safely, securely, responsibly. Now, another example was sepsis. We used AI for the early detection of sepsis. Most people wouldn't realise this, but sepsis is about 90,000 people in Australia that get sepsis every year, hospitalised with sepsis, and about 15% die. 15%. Call it 15,000 Australians every year. If we can use AI, which we're starting to use now, to get early detection of sepsis, that's lives saved. That's more hospital beds freed. That's not just better productivity, better outcomes for people. That's the impact of this AI. I'll give you one more example. We used AI to, government's already looking at you in relation to whether you're speeding or not. So those cameras are everywhere. We don't want people to speed because speed kills. But we use those cameras to also check to see if you're wearing your seatbelt or using your phone. Now, that AI that we used to do for those detections went through an AI assurance framework, which included getting the sign-off from the AI Assurance Committee, which is not a group of politicians just waving a wand like dictators. The AI Assurance Committee was full of data scientists, ethicists, human rights experts, NGO experts. Like, we had the people that we would want to trust in society making these calls. Now, if I said to you as a politician, we're going to use AI, government, Big Brother is going to use AI to check every one of your faces to see if you're happy or sad, I would be here and I would be crucified. If I said, and because we're Big Brother, we're going to use AI to check all of your cars to see if you're mucking around in your phones and everything else, again, I would be here and I would be crucified. But barely a word was mentioned for both, because when the journalists asked, we had an AI assurance framework in place. It wasn't politicians. Politicians had to make the final call, but it was backed on a framework with ethicists, lawyers, and everybody else in play to make sure it was trustworthy. That's how you use AI responsibly, with those profound outcomes. Now, I want to talk about this big fella, the elephant in the room. Government, trust me, is the elephant in the room. Now, I know about a third of you here are from government, but we're all impacted by government, because the government is the elephant in my room, it's in every one of your rooms. Why? Because as soon as you wake up, government's regulating smoke detectors in your home. They're in every home. And they're regulating the seatbelts in your car, right? They regulate everything. But they also roughly about, call it 1 in 5 Australians are employed by the government, whether it's state, federal, local, state-owned corporations, let alone the NGOs and everybody else that's sort of affiliated with them. And the GDP, call it circa 30% of GDP is government spend, i.e. They are not just the elephant in your room, they're the elephant in the marketplace. And there are three types of elephants. There's the bad elephant, the slow elephant, and the good elephant, or the agile elephant. Let's talk about the bad elephant. That's happened when, again, whether it's robo-debt or tech wrecks or whatever it is, there's plenty of examples where governments stuff it up deluxe, big time. And it has traumatic consequences, not just for the government, they get kicked out, but for the people that they trample upon. Right? They are bad. And we need to identify those. But thankfully, they were in the minority. Most governments are in the slow lane. Right? We love the elephant, but they're slow. The big, well, maybe not everyone loves the elephant if they're a government, but yeah, you know what I mean. But they're big, they're powerful, but they move so slow. And when corporates are trying to move so fast and this damn thing's blocking your way, it slows everything down. Then there are the good elephants. The good elephants are the ones that actually lift the logs, that clear the path, that help us move faster through the terrain. What we've got to do is make sure that we transition or get more of the slow governments transitioning into good governments, because that way it doesn't just impact government and people, it impacts corporations and services and everything else in the economy. When the government throws, the government's been talking, to their credit, been talking about productivity, but when the government throws a rock into the productivity pond, it's not just a little ripple. They throw it's a massive stone they're throwing in, so it causes huge impacts. So if we get AI, which is a huge productivity lever, as the Treasurer has said, we need to improve our productivity gains in Australia, and we're not going to do it with pen and paper. We're just not. We're going to have to use tools like AI. But if we do it responsibly, then we'll get not just the small little ripple effect, we'll get huge impact right across the entire economy. So, thank you, Mr. Elephant. You've been very good. Why does digital trust matter? Because AI is accelerating and it is going really, really fast. Like, I wake up every day and I'm downloading YouTube, I'm reading books, I'm doing everything. I can't keep up with how fast it's going, and we're in year 3. We actually haven't even reached year 3 yet. November's year 3. Imagine where we'll be in 3 years' time or in 6 years' time. It's impossible. Like, everyone's going to have one of these things. It's going to be either ambient, it's going to be in their glasses. It's already happening. You can see where it's all going to go. So, we need to make sure that we, A, Victor, learn how to use the clicker, and B, you would have thought as a politician I'd get this right. This is our choice, and the choice is ours. I'll stop on that one there. The choice is ours. Like, we're all leaders in this room. If you've put your hand up to come here, you're interested in the future, and more importantly, the present. If you put your hand up to come here, you're a leader. And as leaders, we make choices. So it's not just choices that impact in the corporate world your staff, but your customers. In the government world, it's choices that infect the entire society. So we need government leaders, we need corporate leaders, captains of industry, and legal leaders. I used to be a lawyer for my sins. And we need legal leaders because they help create the frameworks in place to make sure that we can get the Ferrari, because I like Ferraris, on the track to move fast, to make sure it doesn't just go fast, but it goes the distance. Because there's no use putting a Ferrari on the track and at the first hairpin, you're siding off. Let's make sure we go the distance. So with thoughtful leadership, we actually use this for profound impact. So thank you very much for listening, and I'll improve the clicker next time. Cheers.